Well, Drake, as we approach another fight night this weekend with Marvin Vettori versus Paulo Costa in the main event, it seems like these past several fight night cards, at the very least, have been kind of lackluster, at least on paper. And that's really what the community, the both media and fans seem to be shouting from the rooftops here. Is that Ladd versus Dumont, that card wasn't so great. Dern versus Rodriguez, Santos versus Walker, Smith versus Span. I mean, when you look on paper, not a lot of big name guys, not a lot of ranked people. Go through some of the card, and prelims especially are generally a lot of new fighters or one or two fight names. This has been a particularly rough stretch, I will say, in terms of fight night cards paper. Some have delivered and been fun to watch, others not so much. But with that in mind, Drake, the first question I want to ask you is one, do you agree that it's been rough on paper? Do you think that this has been the worst or one of the worst stretches of fight night cards when it comes to the matchups put together?
I think it might be up there for sure. In terms of at least backlash and vocal opinions that I've seen around the community, it might be the worst. As I was telling you before we went on air here, don't think I've ever seen people so angry. Whether it's just on Twitter or over on the WMA Today podcast here on the Scrap with the chat, not very happy with the fights, and that's exclusively women's fights as well. So they're generally a very positive bunch, but they haven't been the last 2 weeks, so hurts my heart a little bit. But this has been a little tough. I think that for the most part, these main events haven't been too bad. I still don't think the best in terms of, rankings. You look at it, Dern and Rodriguez was probably the highest ranked one. I mean, Costa Vittori coming up here.
Mm-hmm.
I know they'll be floating around there. Costa's still around like 2-ish, right? Don't have him up right now, Pat. But then Vittori, just fought for the title as well. He's coming off that. So between those two, those are, the two highest profile in terms of divisional standing, right? And then, we have some of these others. Obviously, Dumont and Ladd was really... it's featherweight, but I think
one and two at featherweight, my man. 1 or 2 at featherweight.
Well, in that regard, but on the actual rankings, right? Ladd, I think, was she the only ranked fighter, and she was ranked at the division she wasn't even fighting in? I think I saw somebody said that. I saw someone say
could
that was
be true.
I'd have to double ranked fighter.
I'd have to double check that one, but I wouldn't be shocked, honestly. Yeah, looking at it now, I don't see anybody else. Oh, Arlovsky anymore, right?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. So, yeah, no, I think that's a true statement. Yes.
So, I've always been one of those people who believes that, or has been a believer in the weak cards on paper always end up delivering. Generally better than.
Still wanna say that after this past weekend?
Generally, well, again, I didn't watch this past card in full because I was covering Bellator, so I only watched the ladies' fights from this past one. But beforehand, a lot of people shat on the Dern Rodriguez card, which I thought that one was all right. I didn't think it, blew the doors off like some of these weaker ones on paper can do, but I wasn't too mad at it compared to a lot of people. And when you look at the main event getting fight of the night, that was okay with me. I know people mentioned the Jackson fight, which was very fun and very bloody, which always makes it just automatically cool. Violence is great. But obviously neither are fight of the year contenders. And it's always funny to me to give a fight that was overall as one-sided as Dern and Rodriguez, the fight of the night. But of course, big moments and all that kind of thing. Just overall, though, Pat, I think that this stretch has been really rough, and I think I'm just so used to and accustomed to. Well, I guess me myself, I'm generally not too hard to please, especially compared to some of these people. And I'm like that with everything, whether it's movies, video games, my fighting. But as I get older and older, I guess maybe I'm just so used to it or not as excited anymore. I definitely don't think these past two cards have been maybe good, I wouldn't say, but I don't think they've been bad. I don't think they've been atrocious. You tell me, because you saw the last one. I've been all over the place a bit, but I definitely think this has been a very weak stretch, especially when you look back on it like we were kind of just researching ahead of time here. I mean, some of these co-mains, when you look at them, it's like, wow, that was a co-main event. Yes, it's a fight night, but if you look at this, I was talking to somebody over the week about it this past week. If you remember, like UFC on Fox era, we got some stacked fight nights, some buttes. Not the same now.
Yeah. No. I mean, that's 100% true. The UFC on Fox era, I think that was a little bit different in a couple ways, right? Not to go too much down of a business rabbit hole here, but ratings were much more important then. There was not a locked in deal that was going to be secure for X amount of years after Fox, and you needed kind of ratings to kind of be like, hey, we pull ratings, like, you should watch us, and when this deal is done, you should bid for our media rights so we make more money. And it worked out for the UFC very well because of the streaming service side. So then you've got, hey, we just need content, and this is content that we know a lot of people will like. Here you go. And that's a big part of this. That is a big part of why we're getting these fight nights. They have to fulfill so many events per year. We know COVID knocks out a bunch of different events and a bunch of different matchups that I'm sure people would like to have sooner rather than later. And we got that all mixed around, right? Misha Tate versus Caitlin Vera is easily a bout that would have a little bit more aura surrounding it, but has been pushed back due to COVID. We've seen that happen a lot the past couple of years. And so it's been a rough stretch. The only reason, full disclaimer, that I watched those cards was because it was the playoffs of my MMA fantasy league. And so, like, which your boy brought home the belt, so I can't wait to have that belt again soon, because I haven't had it for 2 seasons. But, I mean, that's the only reason that I followed it. Other than that, I'd be watching highlights. I'd be saying, is there anything really that, I missed? I had several friends I know ask me, that, like, hey, like, was doing something else. Is anything worth watching on the card or this, blah, 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 because they knew I'd be watching it. What you said about less name value cards delivering, I think that's true in one way and false in another. And here's what I mean by that. It's true that on a lot of those cards, you do get highlight reel finishes, or you get some great fights, because you've got a lot more, up and coming guys trying to prove themselves, trying to go for a big knockout. You've got mismatches based on the matchmakers not having seen a certain fighter enough that, like, hey, we're going to put them against this guy, and then they just destroy them, or vice versa. You tend to get that a lot more, I think, because it's also partially the UFC kind of saying, like, well, he looked good here, and I've seen a couple of his regional fights. Like, he's a grappler, let's put him up against another good grappler or a striker. And it ends up, being a crazy mismatch that nobody could have really known. I think that's why you get a lot of excitement there. But I would say it's false in the sense where part of why people want those big, captivating cards like we have on UFC 267 and 268. Well, 267 main card for sure, but 268 for sure, 269, right?
Yep.
Reason why they giant cards is because now you know what a fighter is going to do. They usually have been on the mic a fair amount, or you've at least seen their skill set, and it's generally well-rounded if they're making their way up the rankings, right? Might not be the best, but if you have a number next to your name, you're doing something right, usually, especially if you can hold it there. And so it makes these more compelling storylines. People really want to see, like, okay, I've watched, Marlon Vera go through a bunch of guys, and then, yeah, he had a setback with, Jose Aldo, but how's he going to look in his next fight? Like, he's looked so good in these other ones. Was it just Aldo? Was it him? It adds more intrigue. Then you have people vying for title shots. You have, bad blood between various camps. There's way more focus and marketing power behind it. It makes it more fun. It does. It's just makes you more committed, because now we're talking about the best of the best. Nobody in the off season of football, well, a couple people do, but most people don't go watch the CFL and say like, whoa, like I'm just all about this, or Arena Football League and say like, wow, this is crazy. I'm super excited. They want to see the best guys fight the best guys. That's how the UFC became as big as it did, was that scarcity of just trying to grab and lock everybody that was very, very good into long-term contracts. So I understand why people complain with this stretch. I think this is maybe the worst we've seen that I can remember. Definitely the worst of the ESPN era, I'd say. But at the same time, I mean, it's a corporation that's just trying to make money, man. It's, how many times great comparison is WWE. How many times do you turn on their weekly show and know pretty much what you're going to get? Like, it's going to kind of like do whatever, you know what I mean? Maybe it's a bad comparison based on your face, but
consistently bad.
I mean, yeah, that's true. But it's the reason I say that again is that they have weeks to fill, right? Like in WWE, it's been a long time since I've watched that regularly, but they have pay-per-views where you're going to have the big matches on the pay-per-views, and then you have weeks in between where it's like, well, you kind of know the gist of what's happening, and it's just not as exciting. Same thing with these fight night cards. Like, yes, contenders are going to rise through the ranks. Some are going to fall. You might have some boring decisions, boring fights, but these are all just a lot of contenders and up-and-comers trying to prove themselves to get into those more exciting ranked fights, right? Like, it's still separating the wheat from the chaff, whatever that means. I still don't know, but it's a thing.
But I'm gonna use it anyway.
I'm gonna use it anyway because I know I used it correctly, thanks to context clues. But yes, so that's, I don't know. That's my thoughts on it, Drake. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally fair, especially in this era of Dana bringing in all these youngsters off the Contender Series who are not, making a whole lot of money, and then getting the in with the new, out with the old kind of thing, to an extent, as we've seen with those roster cuts at the beginning of the year, right, Pat? Feels like forever since we talked about those, but even some people still getting cut, every so often after events. So I think there's a little bit of that as well. I think you summarized it pretty good there. But I think another question that we can ask, and I've seen people talking about this too, is maybe and it's been going on for years, just as the UFC is the number one and having the biggest roster, potentially leading to oversaturation. So I've seen the argument of, okay, they should go back to doing less shows. Maybe make it more exciting, then they can stack it up, make all these cards nice and big, which would be true, but that doesn't mean they'd all be good, right? So like if you were to do like every 2 weeks and just let's say you combined these last two events, that might make them actually worse as a collective whole, lengthening it out that way. Again, I did not watch the full last card, but that's an idea that I definitely like from a perspective of being able to do more things on the weekend, having some more free time. But, and I think a lot of people who cover the sport like we do enjoy that as well. But, yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily the biggest issue.
I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, again, this is, it is just it's very interesting to me to see people say these types of things and not realize that, again, this is all about business, right? The ESPN essentially said, hey, we have this much need for content. We need pretty much a weekly live show on our ESPN Plus app, right? And now they've kind of added in some other things. They've got, baseball. They've got a couple of college, Division 2, 3 schools that they show depending on the season, right? But when this first started, remember, ESPN Plus didn't have almost anything on it. They didn't even have a chance to bid for the rights for a lot of this stuff. They had almost nothing. And so the deal that was struck was essentially like, hey, we need a weekly live show. So you guys kind of did that with Fox. We need a couple of extra weeks in here, and we just need content. We need our people to keep paying, because if you don't have that weekly show and you go 3 weeks without fights, right? we do have occasional stretches like that in the UFC, but if you did that often, a lot of people would cancel their subscription, right?
True.
And that's what it's all about. They are not putting on these shows and they're not signing all these people because it's like what the fans were really craving. No. Like, I'm pretty sure most fans would be very cool with like once every other week or like 2 or 3 times a month. You could do a couple months in a row, especially if you did get the bigger stack cards and it was just we only put on good events. Fans would love that. But this is just about business. I mean, that's it, man. It's, hey, we ordered a quota, fill this quota. That's it. It's like a TV show, right? We ordered 5 seasons and we need you to produce many. Doesn't matter if the episodes are trash. We ordered it. It's done. Fulfill the order. And that's what's happening here. So, that's a pipe dream, unfortunately, guys. If you're hoping that that's what's going to happen, there's no way.
Yeah, not at this rate, but hey, look forward to these really good pay-per-views. I mean, they're looking pretty good, so I don't know what more we can add.
Yeah, no, I mean, they always do this. They do big, generally do big Q4, Q3 pay-per-views, right? Their New York show, they try and make huge, especially after COVID, makes sense to do. So yeah, you always get the occasional stacked pay-per-view at least twice a year, I want to say. Usually it's the end of the year card or the one in December, and then it's the one around November they've made bigger, but sometimes it's mid summer, right? But
Yes,
like International Fight Week, that type of stuff. So you always get at least 2. This year you're getting more given the Florida card when everything came back and then everything else going on. So, it is what it is, but if you don't, this is the other thing, guys, is that I will tell you this from experience. If you're one of these people that are like, these cards are terrible, it's whatever, like, even as someone who has reported on the sport very regularly, you can skip them, as Drake has alluded to. Like, it's okay. Like, you're not going to miss, like, the craziest thing of your life. Like, you can go do other stuff.
And you can just go back and watch.
Right. Yeah.
It's
like,
not
that's
gone
the beauty
forever.
of it being on ESPN Plus. Is like, you can just go back and watch it at any time, man. Like, don't stress. Just go. I mean, you're not missing much sometimes. You're really not. Like, it's, yeah.
Yeah, well said.
All right. With that in mind, let us know how you feel about this whole situation. Do you believe that there are too many fight cards and they need to scale back? Do you think that they need to make sure that they have, more ranked fighters on these fight night cards? They need to beef them up a bit, maybe have the pay-per-views be not quite as amazing as they are occasionally, kind of spread it out more. What are your thoughts on all of this? Make sure you hit the like, subscribe, bell notification, and yeah, it's business, but it's, it is what it is. It's not going to change. I can't help you. I'm sorry.
Why not, Pat? Come on.
I'll call up Hunter. Give me a second. We'll figure it out.